At this time, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our commencement speaker, Dr. Alicia Moreland Capuia, or she is known by her patients and students, Dr. AMC. The founder and director of the Institute for Trauma-Informed Systems Change at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Dr. AMC is one of the world's foremost experts on trauma and her uses and knowledge to educate and reduce unnecessary human suffering. An assistant professor at Harvard Medical School, her research contributes to an increased understanding of the impact of trauma on brain development and the overall risk for mental illness and how trauma shows up in systems. Dr. AMC has trained U.S. senators and staffers in applying a trauma-informed lens to policies and legislation. She trains various U.S. probation and pretrial service district offices to facilitate trauma-informed change in U.S. pre-sentencing and sentencing guidelines and in post-prison supervision. While in residency training, Dr. AMC built Healing Hurt People Portland, HHP, a trauma-informed, hospital-based, community-focused youth violence prevention program. Dr. AMC is the author of 2 books, Training for Change, Transforming Systems to be Trauma-Informed, Culturally Responsive, and Neuroscientifically Focused, which was published in 2019, and The Trauma of Racism, Exploring the People and Systems Fear Built, published in 2021. Her trauma-informed efforts reach as far as Angola, Africa, where she works in a family clinic and where she founded the Capuia Foundation, which aims to increase access to healthcare and education in the country. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Dr. AMC to the podium to give our commencement address.
Thank you so very much. I called her this morning, Professor, Dr., Madam President Mimi. I want to give honor where honor is due. Thank you to the Board of Trustees. Many thanks to faculty, graduates, families, communities, partners. I am really honored that I have the opportunity to share space with you this morning. I wanted to start out by having a conversation, because I know how these graduation talks go. I've given a few. And sometimes it feels like people are talking at you as opposed to talking with you. And I want to talk with you for a moment, to every single person who gathered here intentionally today to celebrate this momentous occasion, to honor the hard work. And I'm hoping that what I give to you is an offering. And that means that you have a choice, whether or not you want to receive it or not. But that is the spirit in which I come, with an offering. So I'll start the conversation with you this way. Every single time I have the opportunity to be in the presence of anyone, or to be anywhere, or to watch anything, just ask my 3 children. Watching even a cartoon on Disney, there's going to be a lesson afterwards. So we had a conversation probably about 6 months ago. I was watching a Marvel, yes, do not judge me, a Marvel film on Disney with my youngest. And there were 2 protagonists, there was co-protagonists. And during this movie, I was introduced to a poet. And it wasn't even the base of the movie, it was only a small piece. But it introduced me to a poet by the name of Raymond Carver. And Raymond Carver, for many of you who may or may not know, is deemed a minimalist in how he writes. And his writing is conversational and very pithy, P-I-T-Y. It gets to the point. And so here's where I want to start our conversation this morning, with a poem by Raymond Carver entitled The Late Fragment. And did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so. The response, I did. The question, and what did you want? The response, to call myself beloved and to feel beloved on earth. end quote. Now, you probably did not think that I would be coming here today as someone who's a trauma specialist talking about love, but that actually is where I want to begin our conversation, because that actually undergirds a lot of the work that I do. And Carver, like many of us, speaks to a real, profound human truth, and that is, we all deserve love, we all need love, we all deserve love. And so when we think about where we are geopolitically, what's the alternative? The alternative, in the words of Jimmy James Baldwin, is that sometimes perhaps people cling so, and this is a paraphrase, cling so desperately to their hate because if they have to give it up, then they're left with deep emotional pain. And I believe that we don't have to be left in a world with deep emotional pain, but one with hope and love. And I believe that there is a world that cloaks us in love and prevents needless pain. Love is so important. It's important because it sees all, it covers all. And so I'd ask if we would allow love to rest in our shared collective space here today as I endeavor to share a few things with you. If I might, I'd like to offer a few themes. And I want to consider this as a journey. Many of you have come a mighty long way, and you have made it to this point, and I hope that you pause and reflect and appreciate how far you have come, and also appreciate that the journey is still yet before you. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. My journey starts at King Elementary School in Northeast Portland, Oregon. We're at the age of 4, because we started early. From 4 until about the age of 10 at King Elementary School, we had to say a pledge. And many of you know what a pledge is. It's a promise. It's a promise that you make. And the pledge went a little something like this. Today I'm going to do my best to be my best. If it is to be, it's up to me. I am unlimited. And it goes on to say, the dream at King School is very much alive. And I start with this because it helped me to understand very quickly and very early on. It was an exercise of what I now understand to be an exercise in cognitive restructuring. If it is to be, it's up to me. But first, to start out with today, to make a commitment, a renewed commitment every day to do my best, to be my best. A commitment to continue to grow and change and evolve, and to stand in my respective truth with dignity and respect. And then a sense of responsibility. If it is to be, it's up to me. And then a declaration that I'm unlimited. This would go on to be a fuel for me throughout my career. And then I'll juxtapose that to about my 4th grade year. I had a teacher by the name of Miss Cheryl Abba, and she had us work on a writing project. And I had to put together this book. This book, I'm a child of the 80s. Again, don't judge me, but you can if you'd like. And we had to do these little spiral-bound books, and my book was entitled If I Were Rich. And I was a good writer, not a great illustrator. However, in reading and writing this book, I said I was about the age of 8. I said that I want to feed the hungry. I want to work in Africa. I said that I want to make the world a better place. And I still have this book. Now, it is interesting because I believe there are things that were happening around me that I did not have words for. There were people and circumstances, things happening in communities and neighborhoods and families, and I could not put a word on it at the age of 8. But as I began to develop, I knew that whatever that thing was that made people around me feel sad, or that made people feel like they weren't enough, that was something that I wanted to help at the age of 8. And so through the process of time, and I began to get educated, I came to understand that the thing that I was seeing around me was suffering, that folks were suffering. And then I realized very early on that this is something that I felt like I could do something about. So my personal mission became very clear: to do good, to serve others, and to prevent needless human suffering. And I also began to dream very big. One of the very first woman presidents of Africa in Liberia, President Sirleaf, said this, that our dreams should be so big that we don't have capacity enough, or we don't feel we have capacity enough to achieve them. They should be so big that they scare us just a little bit. And I personally and honestly believe that the highest human call is to reduce needless human suffering. And I get to do this work every day, but this work was born very much at King Elementary School before I even had words for it, that I believed that there was something that I could do to prevent needless suffering. So fast forward to today, to the work that I am privileged and honored and blessed to do in trauma-informed systems change. Oftentimes when people talk about trauma, they get to the doom and gloom. And by the way, trauma is indeed the science of suffering, but it is so much more than that. It is just as much about the recognition that we do suffer and that we are on this whole life journey of learning how to suffer well, but it is also about healing and love and safety, all of the things that we all deserve. And so prior to the pandemic, and your student speaker has mentioned this, prior to the pandemic, one of the main things that folks in workspaces were endorsing was that they were lonely. They would say, I'm sitting in a cubicle next to 60 other people, and yet I feel so alone. Then we fast forward to the pandemic, and we see that at this particular instance, that this sensation, this feeling of isolation, of course, it becomes exacerbated. And we have our US Surgeon General saying that one of the hugest, largest threats to public health is loneliness. And so we get to a place where folks begin to think about a few things. I ask us to think about this theme of love because I'm going to come back to it. What folks began to say, we talked about the great resignation, but really it was the great reevaluation. We had a number of folks say during the pandemic, I don't want to be in spaces that are loveless. I don't want to be in places where people don't love me and they don't care for me. And so they began to reevaluate what that looked like for them. That's all a part of this trauma-informed frame. This is idea that the places and spaces in which we operate have to be safe, because safety is a human requirement. As a matter of fact, safety, love, mattering, and compassion are all very much important aspects of our being. We actually need them as much as we need air and water. And so I'll go into just a few more details. This idea of safety, when we all came in here today, no matter whether or not we were conscious of it or not, we are always appraising about whether or not we are safe. And I would say that safety is the one thing that always evades us. Am I safe? I need to be safe, feel safe, and we deserve safety. It is a requisite for us to be able to fully participate actively in our human purpose. And what we also understand and know is that not only are we asking ourselves, are we safe, but we are also asking ourselves, do you care about me? Do you love me? And what I understand and what science demonstrates to us is that these are the two questions that have to be answered in order for us to tap into our fullest potential. Am I safe? And do you love me? So we can't escape love. And there are multiple ways to demonstrate love. Love is demonstrated in listening. Listening is a form of love. Curiosity, being perpetually curious, is a form of love. Compassion, when we break that word down, calm means with, and pasio, the root word, to suffer with. When we suffer with others, Stanford University, I go Cardinal, but Framingham State University too, love y'all too. But when you break that word down and you look at all of the work that's being done at an institute at Stanford, it's the Institute for Altruism and Compassion, and there are randomized controlled trials that look at the benefits of compassion. And here's the key. It demonstrates the results of these randomized controlled trials demonstrates is that being compassionate is not just good for the receiver, but it is equally beneficial to the giver. And what we find is that when we are more compassionate, when we suffer with others, that we are less lonely, we ruminate less, we have less anxiety, less depression, and we live healthier lives. So let us not forget the basics. Compassion is important. And we also know that where we demonstrate and create the conditions for mattering, we demonstrate profound love. And what does it mean to matter? Well, it means that I am seen, I am heard, that I bring value, and that I am valued, and I bring value. Nobody wants to be in spaces where they are invisible. Everyone wants to be seen, heard, and valued. And what we know is that you can belong to a space and still not feel like you matter. So it's not enough to belong. It is most important to create the conditions for mattering, and that is all within our wheelhouse. So I'll get to this. Couldn't get past love. Trauma-informed systems change involves all of this. It's not just the recognition that we sometimes are unsafe and things happen to us that can impact our lives over the lifespan, but it is also about the hope and the promise that if we can get back to the basics, as I said, like to love and compassion, that we can make the world and the environments around us a better place. So then it leads me to this. There is so much happening around us. There are so many things that we want to fix, that we want to change, and it can seem overwhelming from day to day. But what I can tell you is that there is a base, there is a way forward. And it's something like this. It's love first, safety, truth, and then reconciliation. So I want to deal just for a moment with truth. Your colleague here has already reminded you of, since 1839, that Framingham State University's motto has been, live to the truth. And I really thought about this. What does it mean? What does it mean to live to the truth? Is it a commitment to be in constant search of meaning, making the invisible visible, shining light in darkness? It's a kind of a revealing. It's never quite finished. A constant, persistent, active pursuit. And then it got me to thinking, because I'm popular culture. I loved all of the John Grisham novels. I read all of the John Grisham books. The Pelican Brief, A Time to Kill, but let me go to A Time to Kill because that was also made a movie. The Pelican Brief was as well. I might be aging myself here, but follow me, I'm going somewhere. I'm on truth right now, veritas, to live to it. I remember from the movie, the setting is you have a gentleman in the South, African-American gentleman whose child was violated violently by two white men. He did not believe that he would get justice, so he killed those two white men, and then he was imprisoned and then put on trial. Now I'm going to the movie. Who doesn't like Matt McConaughey and Samuel L. Jackson? These are the two main characters in this movie, and I'm setting the scene for you here. And let me just, because I believe we're in an era and a time where I have to say this, I do not condone killing, I do not condone murdering. That's not the point. The point is about truth, so just please stay with me there on that point. So we get to this powerful scene where Samuel L. Jackson is talking to Matt McConaughey, this young lawyer in the South, and he's saying, I'm not going to get off for this unless you can convince this mostly white jurors that I did anything that any father would do whose child was hurt. And it doesn't mean that I should get off from the law, but I need them to empathize, to understand where the rage came from. And so it cuts to this very powerful scene at the end of the movie where Matt McConaughey is giving his closing argument. And here's what Matt McConaughey asked the jurors to do. He says, what is it in us that seeks the truth? Right? This is Matt McConaughey asking, what is it in us that seeks the truth? Now it is incumbent upon us lawyers not to just talk about the truth, but to actually seek it, to find it, to live it. What is it in us that seeks the truth? Is it our minds or is it our hearts? And then he goes on to say that he set out to prove that a black man could receive a fair trial in the South and that we are all equal in the eyes of the law, but that's not the truth, Matt McConaughey says, because the eyes of the law are human eyes, yours and mine. And until we see each other as equals, justice is never going to be even-handed. It will remain nothing more than a reflection of our own prejudices. So until that day, we have a duty under God to seek the truth, not with our eyes and not with our minds, where fear and hate turn commonality into prejudice, but with our hearts. But with our hearts. Now, I have 3 young people, relatively young, in their 20s, teens, and my 18-year-old son had come to me probably about 8 or 9 months ago, and he kept saying to me, "Mother, I'm not gonna hold you." But, and then he'd tell me something, and I was like, why does he keep, the young people will appreciate this. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he says, "I'm not gonna hold you." And I finally decided that I was gonna get curious, and I paused and I said, "Whatever do you mean by you're not gonna hold me?" And he's like, "Oh, that's like young people vernacular for I'm not gonna lie to you." So he says, "I'm not gonna hold you. That dress you have on is not awesome. I need you to change it." So then, of course, I do what I always do. I got deep and philosophical, asked more questions than I have answers. And so I shared with him, I said, "You know, it's interesting, son," who, by the way, is getting ready to graduate and go off to college himself. I'm so excited. So no, you don't have, just in your spirits. I just share it with me in your spirits. But so I shared with him, I said this to him. I said, "You know, it's interesting, this juxtaposition of not holding someone to not lying." I said, it's almost a new way for the young folk to say, a lie will hold you back and keep you almost free, but the truth will help you get fully free. And don't we all deserve that kind of freedom? That the truth in love can set us all free. And so, in the words of my son, I'm not gonna hold you. Times are hard, but let our hearts not be. And that leads me to a third point that I'd like to make about hope. We've talked about love. We've talked about truth. And now I want to talk about hope. John Meacham, a historian, book that I just absolutely love, all of his books, but the most recent one that I read was And There Was Light. And John Meacham says this: "We are not always good, but goodness is possible." And I love this because it recognizes that we must hold space for it all. The complexities, the nuances, the contradictions. And in the prologue of this book, And There Was Light, and the subtitle is Lincoln and the American Struggle, which I think is appropriate for the time that we find ourselves in. Actually, turbulent times as well is another good one. But John Meacham writes eloquently, and I'm going to paraphrase. He says, "For many, to appreciate Lincoln as a whole is to see a snapshot of ourselves in part, our grace and shortcomings. For as long as we are buffeted by the demands of democracy, for as long as we struggle to become what we say we already are, the world's last and best hope. Humanity is the world's last and best hope. It's the one thing that we all share. We can all love. We can all care. We can all create safety. We can all be compassionate. We can all be light." So the general gestalt of this book, Meacham quotes Frederick Douglass by stating this: "I do not despair of this country. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not spent its force." That's powerful. And it fell on Lincoln like it's going to fall on us, to shed light in the darkest of hours. So light. We can't talk about truth without talking about light. Now, as you probably know, the scientist among us, that there are multiple definitions of light, or maybe I should say the English majors. You know that light is a noun, a verb, and an adjective. That the Oxford Dictionary defines light as a natural agent that stimulates sight and makes things visible. The verb is to illuminate or ignite. That light is an absence of darkness and a quality that will aid in our seeing and understanding more clearly. And you probably also know that there are 2 types of light. There's incandescence. There's a state of being extremely bright, the emission of a hot body. And there's luminescence, which is the emission of light by certain materials when they're relatively cool. The point is this: the good news is that no matter what state we are in, we still possess the capacity for light. Anne Lamott said that hope begins in the dark, the stubborn hope that if you show up and try to do the right thing, the dawn will come. And I believe in your ability to show up and to continue to try to do the right thing, because you are the light and you are the hope. And that is where I want to resolve our conversation here today, is with hope. I started this conversation talking about love, and now I want to talk about hope. In 1975, Angola, Africa, gained its independence from Portugal after nearly 500 years of being colonized. Shortly after independence, the Civil War broke out. For 28 years, almost 3 decades of civil war, the second longest civil war in world history. And there's nothing civil about war, that's an oxymoron. But shortly after the Civil War ended around 2002, there was an invitation for folks to come back to Angola, of which my husband is Angolan and my family, my in-laws are Angolan, to come back and to help think about how we might help the country heal. And so I was ready and eager to answer the call. I was living in an 800 square foot English basement in Washington, D.C., right around the corners from the Security Exchange Commission, not far from Union Station. And my father-in-law came to visit. He was on his way back to Angola for the first time after almost 30 years of being displaced. And on his visit, he sat down at our small table with some fufu, also known as shima, and tomato sauce and meat. And he said, I'm going back to the country, and I need you all, talking to my husband and I, to think about what you can do from where you sit to help make this country better. And we got into a pretty heated debate and conversation, and he says, I believe that agriculture is the way forward. And I said, I agree, agriculture is important. And then my husband said, I believe education will be the way forward. I said, I agree, education is important. And I said, well, I am in medical school. I want to make a plug for healthcare. I think it might be important that folks are healthy and have a way to participate in agriculture and education, but there should be a healthy base. And of course, I was kind of sidelined. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Healthcare is important. We'll get to it. So fast forward, my father-in-law left from Washington, D.C., went to Angola for a month, and came back. Upon his trip back, stopped to be with us again in D.C. And he shared an experience. He said, I was driving in a car, and a car came, I was getting out of a car came next to me and hit the door and smashed my finger and broke my finger and exposed the bone in one of my fingers. And I spent days trying to find help, trying to get medication. I had to buy my own syringes, buy my own medication. I couldn't find the help that I needed, and so we were able to get him some support in the States upon arrival. So he said, you know, Alicia, the conversation that we were having about what needs to go first, I'm thinking you might be right. We should probably focus on healthcare. So we got to work, fast at work, 9 brothers and sisters, everybody with the last name Kapuya, everybody in my family gave what they could. And we got to work of building one door at a time, one window at a time. We built a clinic that provides substance, and it's been up and running since 2015 in Angola, Africa, and it provides subsidized healthcare for a little over 1,100 Angolans outside of a little small town of Luanda, Kakwaku. And we are very proud of this because all of the people that work there, from the doctors to the phlebotomists to the front desk staff, they're Angolan. So we brought roads, water, lights. We brought health, we brought education, and now we are about 2 years away from building an education institute right next door to the clinic. I go to Angola every year, and when I go, I get the benefit of hearing the beautiful stories of the people who are wonderful. They have endured so much, that they are incredibly genius, incredibly loving and caring. And so I paused and I wanted to ask, how is it that you can still have so much hope? How is it that you can still brush up against the edges of joy after you've experienced so much pain? And while Portuguese is one of the main languages there, the native language, one of the native languages is Ubuntu. And one of the elders in the community said this to me in Ubuntu. Ayowelele kolela. Ayowelele kolela. And in Ubuntu it means, we have suffered, but yet we hope. We have suffered, but yet we hope. That this idea, this concept of suffering, but yet hoping, that it translates to indigenous languages and cultures, that it translates to continents and people. And that's where I want to end. I want to end with the hope that you are, as I started out saying, that you're the living dream. You are unlimited. And if it is to be, it is up to you. It's going to be up to you. This idea that the world around us is full of suffering, but it is also full of overcoming it. That our shared humanity and hope are preserved and honored when we love one another. And I believe, like Martin Luther King, that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final say. It must. We have to get back to the basics. We have to get back to the basics. And I also want you to know that your pain matters, your purpose matters, your joy matters, your hope matters, your dreams matter. I am literally changing the world with love, and I invite you to do the same. You are light, you are loved, you are beloved, you matter. And in the words of my Angolan family in Ubuntu, Twapendula, thank you and congratulations.